Hi, I'm Rachel Hovland with Pheasants Forever. I'm here with Dan Compton from Federal Ammunition, here to talk about bird hunting ballistics. We're going to cover what are shot shell components, what do the different numbers mean on a box of shotgun shells, and how do these variables affect how your shot shell patterns. So Dan, can you tell us, how does a shotgun shell work?
Yeah, sure. So there's different types of ammunition out there, and there's what's called center fire rifle or handgun, which shoots one single solitary bullet. And then there's shotguns, which shoot a bunch of pellets through the air at one time. But it all kind of starts the same, no matter what ammo you're using, and it starts with the primer at the back. And this primer is set inside of a metal head on top of a plastic tube. And shotgun shells can be made out of plastic or they can be made out of paper. Plastic is far more common today. So inside your gun, there's what's called a firing pin. You'll pull the trigger and it makes this little metal piece come forward, hit this primer, and that sets off like a stick of TNT inside your gun. It's like dynamite going off, which is then going to ignite the powder, which sits behind that, and that creates this big ignition and a big pressure build. And that pressure build is going to start to push this piece of plastic, which has a cup which is filled with this shot, and as that pressure builds, the top of the shotgun shell is going to uncrimp, and eventually it just releases and it fires all that shot down the barrel, out the bore, through the air, and hopefully hits the target that you're aiming.
Oh, very neat. So there's lots of information out there when we're looking to buy specific shells. Can we go through what these specific numbers mean on the box?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're looking at like this box of our Top Gun target loads here, you're going to find what's called the gauge, inches or length of the shotgun shell, the speed or velocity, something called dram equivalent, and then something that's measured in ounces, and then it says number 8 shot. Yeah. All that has a specific meaning, and it really does. They're all going to have different applications depending on what you're doing out in the field. So we can start with gauge. Okay. Gauge is basically saying this is how powerful the load is in the shotgun that you're using. And they range anywhere from 410 bore to 10 gauge, and as that number gets smaller, it's kind of counterintuitive, the gun actually gets bigger. And so 12 gauge is the most common use out there, 20 gauge is the second most common, and if you're going to pick up a gun and go target shooting or just go hunting in the field any day, those are probably your 2 most common choices out there if you're new and getting started.
So it's really important to make sure you're shooting the correct gauge shell for your shotgun.
Yes, absolutely. You always want to match the right cartridge to the right shotgun you have. And there's different ways you can do that. On most or all guns should have stamped on the barrel, it's going to say 12 gauge, 20 gauge, and then whether that can take 2 3/4 inch shells, 3 inch shells, and so on. So you can always reference your firearm. And if you have a question, always stop by your local gun store, bring your firearm in, and they'll be more than happy to talk you through that as well.
Well, because that leads off into shell length, right?
Yeah,
there.
so there's various lengths of shotgun shells. In 12 gauge, it's anywhere from like 1 3/4 inch, little short guys, all the way up to 3.5. As they get bigger, you can get more power out them, or you can fit more of the actual shot pellets inside the load. And typically, 2 3/4 is the most common by far and the most diverse load that we offer.
Okay. This box is saying feet per second?
Feet per second is exactly what it sounds like. So imagine these pellets are going to leave the barrel going, you know, in this example, 1,145 feet per second. So that's moving pretty fast, but ammo comes in different speeds.
Why would you need different speeds?
Sure, so typically as you add speed, you're going to start to add a level of power, and with that power is going to come a level of recoil. All the energy that goes forward, you're going to feel coming backwards as well through the shotgun. So let's say you're a target shooter and you shoot trap, and you're going to go out and shoot 100 rounds of trap today. You don't necessarily want the most high-powered, fastest load out there because you want your shoulder to live through the afternoon, and you want it to be a comfortable, enjoyable experience. Well, if you're going to go out in the pheasant field is a little bigger bird. You're going to want a little more energy and a little more speed to catch up with them as they fly fast and to knock them out of the air. So your 1330 might be more of an option. A little faster load, a little more power to bring the knockdown power to bring the bird down, and you might feel it a little more on your shoulder.
Gotcha. All right, so then you were referencing payload. Can you talk about the diversity in payload and why you would want lighter or heavier loads?
Absolutely. So payload is measured in ounces. And then what all that refers to is how many ounces of this type of shot are sitting inside that load. And you'll see, like on a target load, a 1 ounce, which is not as much, but obviously if you go up to 1 1/4 ounces, you're adding more shot to it. So as you add more shot, you're filling out your pattern more, and it gives you more opportunity to hit the target. Your trade-off of more shot is, again, like we talked about with velocity, you're going to feel a little more recoil because you're pushing a heavier object forward out of the gun. So typically in a target shooting aspect, you're looking for like a lighter load, a 1 ounce or 1 1/8 ounce. And as you get up into hunting and bigger birds, you may want 1 1/8 ounce to 1 1/4 ounce.
That makes sense. So for a pheasant, you're probably going to want significantly more than you would for like a grouse or a duck.
Yes, 1 1/4 ounce is the most common by far for like an upland load. Your quail hunters, they shoot a lot of 1 1/8 ounce, and target shooters are 1 ounce to 1 1/8 ounce.
So I assume payload and shot size kind of have a relationship. Like the bigger the shot, I'm assuming you would get less per load?
Yes, exactly, because you think it weighs 1 1/8 ounce, and because they're bigger, they have more internal weight themselves. So shot sizes kind of go backwards in size as well. So a number 2 shot is really common for duck hunting. So think bigger pellet. A number 8 shot is for really small birds or target shooting, and it's a lot finer and smaller, and then everything else kind of falls in between. So in an 1 1/8 ounce load, you're going to have a lot more number 8 shots filling up that space, similar to this, versus a number 2, which is a bigger pellet, which will sit about the same height, but there's just a lot more air in between them inside the load.
That makes sense. So I assume with payload, shot size, shot material must greatly affect those variables. Could you explain those a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's different types of materials that lend themselves really well to shot. We want a nice round pellet, and so lead is a good option for that. It's very malleable, easy to work with, very easy to make a round pellet. Lead is typically used for target hunting and some upland hunting out there. And then there's also steel as well. Steel can be made to be like a nice ball-bearing grade, shoots well, patterns well as it flies through the air. Steel is typically used by duck hunters. It's considered non-toxic, and you can't shoot lead into wetland areas. And so you'll find that universally across the country.
So Dan, we just covered a lot of information really quickly here. Say I'm a new hunter and I'm just really intimidated. I'm in the ammo aisle and there's so much information. What might be a good go-to, say, for a pheasant hunting load and a quail hunting load?
Sure, so as a pheasant hunter, if you're shooting with 12 gauge, I would recommend 1 1/4 ounce load at 1330. So that's 1 1/4 ounce of shot going 1,330 feet per second. It's going to cover most of your needs, and then typically you'll find number 4, number 5, or number 6 shot in that family. I'm 1 1/4 ounce, 1330, number 5, and that's what I run with most of the time. If I was going to quail hunt, I'd look for an 1 1/8 ounce load, and I'd probably shoot a 7.5 or 8 shot personally.
Just because the bird's smaller, you can handle that.
Yeah, and more, they're fast, they're quick, and more pellets really help fill that pattern up for you as it flies through the air versus having less smaller pellets.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I guess that's going to lead us off to there's even one more component, choke restriction in a shotgun.
Yes.
And that's really going to affect how shotgun shells shoot also.
So guns used to be built like a 12 gauge shotgun like this with just one diameter constriction level at the barrel. What gun companies came up with was a way for you to optimize your ammunition best depending on what use you're doing. And they did this with what's called a removable choke tube. So it's this little piece of metal that you screw into the end of your barrel of your shotgun. And what it does is some are more open and some are tighter. And that has an effect on the shot that's going to fly out of your barrels. And it's really very intuitive. If you're going to constrict it more, typically your shot's going to hold together tighter longer and you can get a little more range out of it. If you open it more up, your shot's going to spread quicker and it's going to be better for close range targets.
That makes sense.
So 3 common choke tube sizes are full, modified, and improved cylinder. Full is going to be the tightest choke tube you can find. And I would use that in a scenario maybe really late season pheasant hunting with really windy conditions and the birds are flying up further away from you, or turkey hunters use really tight shot because they really want to focus that pattern. Modified is probably the most common, and it's going to kind of be that mid-range dense pattern. Very common for your average pheasant hunter or your waterfowlers use a lot of modified shot with steel shot. And then improved cylinder is a little more open than modified. So very common at close range birds if you're hunting pointers or behind pointing dogs, or if you're target shooting at the range, it's going to be a good option for that.
Okay. So Dan, how do I know how each choke tube patterns in my shotgun?
Yeah, so the best thing to do is actually shoot the gun. Just like a rifle hunter sights their gun in to know where their point of aim is, you do the same thing with the shotgun, and you'll try those various choke tubes. I'm going to show you how that pattern differs, whether you go from the full down to the improved cylinder, and those different constrictions in between. So we get asked, well, patterning, what is that? So we're going to set up a piece of cardboard, we'll put it at about 30 yards, we're going to aim at the center of that cardboard, and then we're going to shoot at it. And when we're going to go to it, we're going to look and try to find where the center of that pattern is most and kind of form a circle around it. And then look and see how evenly is our shot covering that circle, and how does that differ, that center of that circle, versus where we were pointing at the target. And that'll give us a good idea where we need to aim at the targets that we see flying through the air.
Okay, well, I've got my shotgun. Should we go pattern it?
Yeah, let's go do it.
Cool. Okay. All right, so I've got my 12 gauge here. We've got improved cylinder on the bottom, modified on top. What shell are we going to be shooting?
We'll start with patterning a target load, our Top Gun target load. It'll be a number 8 shot and 2 3/4 inch.
All right, so we swapped out the choke tube, so modified's in the bottom this time. Let's shoot that same shell.
Sounds good.
All right, so now I've got a full choke in the bottom.
Yeah, and remember, full is going to give you the tightest pattern, so you use that when you're looking for the longest range shot possible, or the most dense pattern that you're trying to achieve.
All right, should we go check it
Let's
out?
go look at it. Yeah, so to regroup, same load, 3 different constrictions on the choke tube. Improved cylinder, the most open of the constrictions, and you can kind of see that on the pattern. It gave us our wider target.
Yeah, you see a lot more pattern in the outskirts.
And you know, in and of itself, it looks good, but then you start to compare it to something else that's starting to choke it tighter, like the modified. You see the pellets hitting closer together, your overall circle's a little more narrower, and then the full is the most tight pattern. So how does that relate to a shooter? This is where the different hunting scenarios or shooting scenarios may come in. If you're trap shooting and it's 16-yard common trap, like what you see in a basic field, improved cylinder is probably more than enough, and you need to constrict your hunting. Or if a lot of people shoot double barrel shotguns, and that gives you the option. You can have one of each of these choke tubes in, and your first shot can be a closer one, and your second one is more than likely the bird will be further away. You can have a tighter constriction. So if I was hunting pointer dog, in which I know I'm probably gonna have a closer shot, my first barrel is probably improved cylinder, my next barrel is probably modified. And then as you get into different hunting scenarios, really windy days, really wild pheasants that are getting up really far away, you might want to look at going into, between a modified and a full choke, just so you're getting as many pellets as possible on the bird flying through the air.
But it seems like if you don't know the scenario, a mod is a good go-to.
Absolutely, that's the most average. Most guns, if you buy a gun and it doesn't come with a choke tube set, it's going to come with a modified choke, 9 times out of 10. The best way to reference it is, always talk, gun stores are great references. Tell them, I need to know more about choke tubes, what should I be using? Everybody loves to tell you what they use, and they'll be more than happy to help you.
Right. So Dan, what are we doing now?
Sure, so now we're gonna shoot a waterfowl load, typical waterfowl load, and this is a shot size called double B, which is one of the bigger sizes on the spectrum. And then we'll compare it to the target loads we just shot, which is number 8, which is one of the smaller shot sizes on the spectrum, and just show you the kind of the drastic difference between the amount of pellet counts between the 2 loads.
Yeah, I bet it will be pretty dramatic. All right, so we have this going back into a modified choke.
Yes, correct. Gotcha.
Look at those holes. You can see them from here. Man, you can really tell the difference with the shot size here.
Absolutely, a lot bigger. You can see fewer of them. Still pretty tight though, right? So in a load like this, I think we have 81 pellets or so. And that number 8 shot that we shot before, it's right around 460. So you just see that drastic difference.
Really dramatic.
Overall, the circle doesn't change too much, but definitely how you fill it out sure does.
Now, Dan, could you explain a scenario, like why would I want fewer bigger pellets in my circle here?
Sure, so just imagine like a bigger bird, like a goose. A goose is a big bird, powerful bird. You can hit them with a bunch of small pellets like that, but you might not get the penetration and the overall energy you're gonna need to really penetrate deep, hit the vitals, and knock the bird out of the sky. So your rule of thumb, typically, the bigger the bird gets, the bigger the shot you're gonna shoot at them to bring them down. Also, a larger pellet carries its energy further, so it should help extend your range a little bit too. So you'll hear about snow goose hunters who are hunting big flocks of birds that might hang high above them for a ways. They'll up their shot sizes so that they can shoot a little bit further.
That makes sense. The bigger shot's gonna have more knockdown power.
Yes.
So we just got done patterning our shotgun. Dan, I really appreciate you coming out. You provided just a bunch of information for everybody to learn today. Really appreciate it. With Pheasants Forever, I just want to say, we've got this long-standing partnership with Federal Ammunition, and we're just so grateful to have you guys here.
Yeah, so thanks for having me. Our relationship with Pheasants Forever Quail Forever has been fantastic, lasts for decades. A very true partnership in a great sense. You've helped us launch products together. We've used Pheasants Forever members as focus groups for us. We recently launched a 28 gauge and 16 gauge at Prairie Storm, and that was some direct feedback from the user base, so we really appreciate it. So we're looking forward to working together in the future, putting out more content like this and working together.
We do love our Prairie Storm. So where can folks go to learn more information about federal ammunition?
Sure, the best resource for us would be federalpremium.com on our website, and then we're on all social channels as well, and we're always putting out new informational content every day.
Great, awesome. So thanks for joining us today on this Path to the Uplands segment. To learn more, please check out pheasantsforever.org/path to the uplands or quailforever.org/path to the uplands for more information. Thanks for joining us today, guys.